Konnichiwa. Welcome to Japan. Behind me, you can see the cherry blossoms and Mount Fiji, as Japan is a very scenic country. If you ever wanted to visit Japan, you may want to know the customs and courtesy before you visit. First off is the bow. The bow is a very simple act, yet it speaks volumes. It stands for your respect and the gratitude and appreciation you have towards the people of Japan. Another thing that's very simple is the removal of your shoes or slippers before you enter a house or hotel or restaurant in Japan. You want to maintain the integrity and the cleanliness of the location wherever you may be, and it could be a good impression you give off towards the people of Japan. Another thing is, you do not want to be sitting crisscross applesauce like you would in America. You want to be sitting with your feet under your body and your hands in your lap and your back upright, as it signifies you are very attentive and a very respectful person. Another thing Japanese culture that values greatly is table etiquette. You may hear somebody say, "Itadakimasu," which means let's eat. And if you hear that, you should repeat the same thing, as it shows that you're paying your respects for the animals and plants that have sacrificed themselves for your meal. It's just another respectful notion that you could say. And more often than not, you're going to be using chopsticks. So do not fiddle with your chopsticks and put them vertically in your bowl of rice, as this is a symbol of bad luck and almost mimics a sort of tombstone or gravestone. The Japanese culture views the idea of marriage as a consolidation of two individuals with their respective family. And this idea kind of goes hand in hand with their holistic and collectivist view of themselves. A unique aspect of Japanese marriage is their wedding attire. Their wedding attire is very much different than other cultures, as you can see in these images that they are wearing traditional kimonos. And these kimonos are T-shaped garments that represent the longevity and the overall luckiness of the marriage. And these kimonos vary from many different colors, but as you can see in these images, the most common are black, white, and red, and these vibrant, flamboyant colors that very stand out. Aside from their unique wedding attire, another aspect about Japanese weddings are their rituals. And a common ritual that you may observe is san san kudo, which translates to 3 times 3 exchange, which is 3 rounds of 3 sips of sake, in which the first sip represents the 3 couples, the groom, the bridesmaid, and the families. And the second is the flaws of hatred, passion, and ignorance. And the third sip is the freedom of the 3 flaws. So let's go ahead and see this ritual in action.
A bride and a groom will share 3 cups of sake, of rice wine, in a gesture that is called sansakudo, or the way of 339. Since odd numbers cannot be divided in 2, they're considered very lucky. So 3 sips from 3 shared cups of sake make an exceptionally lucky night. The sharing of sake cups not only symbolizes the union of 2 people, but it's also the uniting of 2 families. And the graduated size of the cups, from small to large, shows how love and wisdom and happiness in marriage grow and deepen over time.
As observed in that video, you can see the performance of the san san kudo tradition. To mimic one of the cups, they go 1, 2, and then 3, they drink, and they repeat this for 3 rounds. Another aspect that they mention in the video is the idea of the growing magnitude of the cups. As you can see, it's small at the top and then grows bigger, bigger, bigger towards the bottom. And this kind of represents, as you go through marriage, your love, wisdom, and gratitude for each other grow immensely and even stronger, and strengthen your relationship with one another. Last but not least, the Japanese heavily value the idea of business and professionalism. They expect you to bow to every single person in the room when entering an organized meeting, just to acknowledge the presence of others. Also, they are very group oriented and believe in teamwork. which kind of adds to their idea of holistic and collectivism. For example, if you wanted to talk to this man right here, you'd have to talk to the whole team. The idea of convening as a team allows them to integrate different points of views and perspectives and weigh their pros and cons of each, and then collectively at the end make a decision and then proceed forward.
Hello, so my name's Kayla, and I was in charge of the people of Japan. I'm going to skip over a couple of things because of the time constraints, but I really do think that that's doing a disservice to this culture. I think it's really beautiful. So the first thing is values and attitudes. Harmony is their biggest one. Harmony is what is to Japan what freedom is to America. It's at freedom and liberty, that idea is super, super important. It's this idea of peace and empathy and group prioritization. And it's a group over individuals kind of idea. They don't want to, that idea of like nails that stick out get hammered in. That's a very common saying. That disturbing group harmony is very looked down upon. It's a very collectivist culture. And from harmony stems a couple different things. And one of those is hard work. Hard work is a really important part of harmony. It's a community-driven workforce. It's very beautiful. Another thing is modesty. So praise is deflected, bragging is looked down upon. That idea of the talented hawk doesn't show its claws. It's a very common saying as well in Japan. And this is also to smooth social interactions and that idea that nobody is better than another, that very collectivist idea. Another big overarching theme of Japanese culture is honor, the idea of reputation and family and how that reputation of the individual reflects onto the groups they're a part of. And through self-control, fear of failure, that idea that the sense of self is really deeply intertwined with the perceptions of others, and status and belonging is determined by your reputation. And this is correlated to Japan's really low crime rate, because crime does bring dishonor to the individual and the groups they're a part of. Another thing that stems from this idea of honor is hierarchy. It's reverence and respect of seniority. And this is not to say that they're better, but they are more senior. They have more respect and they have more privileges, but they also have more responsibility and expectations put to them. So they're pretty intuitive, these rules, but for outsiders, they can be seen as pretty complicated. They're very low context. If they have an issue, they will say it with their body language before they say it with their mouth. Sometimes they won't say it with their mouth at all. But we've learned how that works and why that is. The younger generation is kind of stemming away from this. It's a very globalized worldview. The pretty Western individualist values are seeping in. So that resistance to hierarchy is pretty prevalent in their youth. Religions are Shinto and Buddhism, and they're practiced in tandem, but most Japanese people consider themselves atheists, even though they do practice traditional rituals of both religions. The population is 126.2 billion. It's the 11th highest. They are undergoing a population decrease because young people are having trouble finding economic stability. So they are one of the oldest countries in the world, on average. Their holidays, there's about 16 that are recognized by the Japanese culture and the government, but the most important ones are, and I'm going to go from top right to bottom left, New Year's Day, Coming of Age Day, an emperor's birthday, and then Golden Week, which is 4 different holidays that are all surrounded by Emperor Hirohito, Japanese Culture Day, and the birthday of the incumbent emperor, because the birthdays are very, very important for Japanese people, the birthdays of their emperors. So this is a parade from Golden Week. A lot of flowers, very colorful, very beautiful. Political beliefs, they're set up like a constitutional monarchy. They're very similar to England, where that royal family is more of just a placeholder. They don't really have any political power. They have 5 different political parties, and these are the names of those. They range from social democratic to communist, all the way from left to right. It's just about everything. The multi-party system. Their most important issues, and this is from their government website, is their economy, the diversity in the workplace, religious strength, sustainability, and foreign affairs. The language, they have two language families, but most languages that are spoken in Japan are dying out. Hayujungo, however, is the national language. It's the most common form of Japanese dialect. And for my activity, I wanted to show you the way that they write. So this is the way that they write harmony in Japan. And this is a very big idea for them. It's very beautiful. And it's one of their most like highly respected values. And it's very, very important to them. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think it's a beautiful way to write it as well. So that's my presentation on Japan. I did go over a little bit and I'm really sorry about that, but there was no way I was going to make this in 3 minutes. I'm so sorry about that. And I wish I could tell you more.
My name is Miranda and I'm part of the Japan group and I'm doing lifestyle. Japan's population is over 126 million, 75% of whom occupy urban areas like Tokyo, Kawasaki, Osaka, and Nagoya. With such densely populated cities, space is precious and land prices are extremely high. Japan's population has been aging since 2011, with some of the world's oldest residents living in Okinawan Islands. Like most city workers, have office jobs and are known as salarymen or OL, office ladies. Management is hierarchical and the work ethic is strict, with overtime assumed. In fact, leaving on time suggests a lack of commitment and loyalty. Nevertheless, people enjoy a high standard of living. This is housing. In ancient Japan, there were essentially two different types of houses. The first was known as pit-dwelling house, in which columns are inserted into a big hole dug in the ground, then surrounded by grass. The second was built with the floor raised above the ground. With such style of house with an elevated floor is said to have come to Japan from Southeast Asia. And this type of building was apparently used to store grain and other foods so that they wouldn't spoil from the heat and humidity. And around the 11th century, when Japan's unique culture came into full bloom, members of the aristocracy began to build a distinctive style of house for themselves called shinden-zakuri. This type of house, which stood in the midst of a large garden, was symmetrical, and its rooms were connected with long hallways. It allowed residents to enjoy seasonal events and the beauty of nature. The houses of the common people developed differently. Farmers in different regions of the country had houses that were adapted to local conditions. The houses built in the Gasao style and Shirakawa-go, which is listed as a World Heritage Site, are examples of residences in which common people lived. Some farmers' houses had space to keep their cattle and horses indoors, while the houses of city dwellers were often squeezed close together along the sheets, as urban homeowners were taxed based on the width of the front side of the house. Their houses were built to be long and narrow. The style can be seen today in older cities like Kyoto. Housing continued to develop in the Meiji era 1868 through 1912. Some towns had houses built in like Kurazukuri style, which featured Japanese-looking exteriors, but were made from more fire-resistant materials. The style that is the basis for Japanese homes today, which usually have a long hallway through the middle of the house with rooms on each side, is said to combine foreign culture with the style of house preferred by the samurai. Transportation. The evolution of Japanese transportation system got off to a slow start due to the isolation that preceded the Meiji period in Japan. The main means of transportation in order of use in Japan are the trains or railways, followed closely by the use of bicycles and lastly by automobiles. The first railway line in Japan commenced operations in 1872 and linked Shinbashi and Yokohama. Today, if you attached all of the train tracks in Japan together, they would take you 2/3 of the way around the world, or approximately 27,000 kilometers. Bicycles. The first company to produce bicycles in Japan was Miyata Industry Company, who began bicycle production in 1890 and is still in operation. Today, the bicycle is the most common means used for running errands in and around your neighborhood and for commuting to the nearest train station. The first domestically produced gasoline-powered vehicle in Japan was the Takuri, built in the early 1900s.
Hello class, my name is Gilbert, and I had the nation. I'd like to start with history and government. Japan's first inhabitants date back to 30,000 BC, where they lived off the land until a centralized government formed in about 400 BC. Japan has a dynasty with an emperor as a leader. In 794, a new capital was established in modern-day Kyoto. This marked the beginning of the Heian period, which is a golden age for the Japanese. It saw development in literature, art, and architecture. So one thing I have to show you, this dish is from my neighbors who are Japanese, and they recently moved back from Japan. And as a thank you for helping them clean out their garage, they gave us several items, one of which was this dish. It has a tree with a poem on it. The poem is from Sugawara no Chimizane, who is one of the most well-known Japanese poets, and he was a poet during the Heian period. So, a segment of this poem reads, "When an east spring wind blows, please bring me your scent, you plum tree." So, it is about his fascination to one of the plum trees in the Kyoto garden. The Europeans introduced Western civilization to the Japanese, ending their isolation policies. From there, they learned more about astronomy, anatomy, and even electricity. During this time, they were also shifting towards a democracy. In 1914, with the support of the United Kingdom during World War I, Japan seized German-occupied islands in the Pacific, which gave them a seat at the League of Nations. In 1939, they violated these accords with the invasion of Manchuria, which created tensions that would later escalate into World War II. 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, which brought the United States into the war. In 1945, Japan would surrender following the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 1947, Japan became a constitutional monarchy. Since then, they've had a huge economic boon, ultimately making it one of the most successful economies in the world. So next, I'll move on to educational systems. Japan hosts one of the most well-educated populations in the world and has the highest number for college and university completion. Its Ministry of Public Education is responsible for establishing the regulations that are in place for the educational systems, and they revise those national curriculum every 10 years. So grades 1 through 9 in Japan are mandatory for citizens, and they operate on a 6-3-3-4 scale, which means 6 years of elementary, 3 years of junior high, 3 years of high school, and 4 years of college or university. Public schools are free, but lunches, textbooks, and transportation all need to be paid for. And finally, Japan's home to over 800 universities. Onto the land and climate. Japan is an archipelago of about 7,000 islands. Its total land area is roughly 145,000 miles, stretching 2,300 miles from north to south. And it also experiences all 4 seasons. Being where it is too, the Philippine and Eurasian plates are meeting, which gives it its mountainous geography. In the north, it has a subarctic climate, while in the south, it is subtropical. Japan is also one of the world's largest economies. Currently holds the number 3 spot in rank for the largest economy, has a population of about 125 million people with a GDP per capita of $42,000. Japan uses the Japanese yen as its currency and is the 3rd largest car manufacturing country with brands like Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, Yamaha, Mitsubishi, Subaru, and Mazda, to name a few. It has the lowest unemployment rate out of any of the countries in the G7, which include the United States, France, Canada, the United Kingdom, Germany, and Italy. Japan also has one of the most impressive displays of transportation. It uses a system of metros in its metropolitan areas, as well as buses and automobiles. Tokyo International Airport is the busiest airport in Asia, and in 2013 installed over 100 million passengers. Along with air and land travel, it uses the waterways with ferries for transportation as well. Some of these ferries also operate internationally, taking passengers from neighboring countries. Moving on to their medical facilities, sanitation, and overall health, Japan is one of a kind. It holds the highest life expectancy, with the average male living to 81 and the average female living to 87. This mainly comes down to their diet, which is primarily fish, rice, soy, fruits, vegetables, and noodles. Healthcare in Japan is publicly funded, with the government paying about 70% of the cost and the patient paying the remaining 30%. medical facilities in Japan have access to some of the world's most advanced technologies, like the Da Vinci robot that's used in bypass surgery for hearts. The nation of Japan is culturally rich and full of new, innovative ideas and technologies. It's definitely a standout nation in today's time, and I hope that we can all take something away from this beautiful nation, from its geography to its people. Thank you.
Konnichiwa, everyone. Today, I'll be talking about nonverbal and verbal communication styles in Japan. So, when it comes to verbal communication styles, it's good to know that Japan is a high context culture. What does that mean? Well, a lot of times people can say something and it can be an understatement or it can be vague. So, a good way to get around a lot of these confusions could be to ask questions. People don't want to be rude and they want to be respectful. So, it's a good way to get around that confusion. Also, another thing is that when it comes to refusals, people don't typically give a blunt no. That's considered rude, and people will usually give an excuse like, "Oh, I can't because of this." So one excuse is "Iya moi takasan onkai ipayado." Sorry if I butchered that, but it roughly translates to, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't because I'm full." So that would be like if someone's offering you food. And people will also show that they regret something or they kind of beat themselves up if they can't say yes to someone. In terms of words, the word please could be kundasai. So that's usually used when asking for something. But if you're offering something and you're using the word please, you would say dozo or dozo. When you're trying to get someone's attention, you can say sumisasen, and that roughly translates to excuse me. And the word guminasai also translates to sorry, and it's a literal translation. So when it gets to nonverbal communication, people don't really point with their index fingers like in the West. They'll point with an open palm. So they'll point over there, and that's because pointing is considered rude in Japan. But if someone's pointing to themselves, they will typically point towards their nose and they'll use their index finger because then in that case, it's okay. They're just pointing to themselves. When it comes to laughing and smiling, again, the Japanese culture isn't really big and as attentive as American culture. So a lot of times smiles are subtle. And when people laugh, they aren't big bursts of laughter, but giggles. And oftentimes you'll find someone in Japan covering their mouth while they giggle. And it's common in a lot of Japanese media, anime, for example, is one of them. And yeah. So let's get on to the verbal, nonverbal greetings. Handshakes. In Japan, people usually give a limp handshake, and this is because giving a strong, firm handshake is seen as kind of aggressive. Yeah. When it comes to bows, there are actually a couple different types of bows. So, as was mentioned in before, bows can be greetings, but you have the ashaku, which is a 15-degree bow that is used to greet acquaintances or people that you typically see. The kiri is a bow that is around 30 degrees, and that is used to greet someone new. They have bows for saying goodbye or for thanking someone, and that's typically around 45 degrees to 60 degrees. But then they have bows for apologies, which go as far from like 45 degrees to even 90 degrees, and people even bow their heads to show that they are sincere. So, eye contact. All I can say is avoid it. It's seen as a sign of aggression in Japan. People typically try to shy away from it. They'll look away, and slight eye contact is okay, but don't maintain eye contact like you would in America. So, waves. People will wave with both hands when greeting someone or saying goodbye. And if they're telling someone to come over, they'll actually have the back of their palm or their hand facing towards someone. And a side to side wave like this or like that is actually a refusal of someone. So I hoped you enjoyed my presentation, and I have a little quiz for these nonverbal emblems. Hi everyone, it's time for another episode of
Guess that gesture!
And today we'll be looking at Japanese gestures. So, guess and follow along. Did you get all of them correct?